All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a little bit of time to enjoy the great weather outside. And now here we go with another wonderful few programs here. Our next speaker is Dr. Peter Hook of Wayne State University's School of Library and Information Science, whose presentation is titled The Structure and Evolution of the Academic Discipline of Law in the U.S., Using Technology to Map a Discipline, which I believe deals with data analytics, information visualization, and data mapping. Not long ago, I was reviewing one of the many lists that you see on msnbc.com, and this list was about the 25 highest paying jobs with the most openings right now, and very high on that list of 25 was the job of data scientist, a position which finds meaning out of, and I quote, heaps of data. The average base salary was listed at $105,000. So what Dr. Hook is presenting on is literally cutting edge, and you've come with rave reviews from several people. Dr. Hook received his library degree from the University of Illinois, his JD degree from the University of Kansas, and his PhD in information science from Indiana University. Dr. Hook practiced law for 2 years and worked for 10 years as an academic law librarian. How about that? His teaching foci are data analytics, information visualization, and domain mapping. Not domain mapping. Domain mapping. I can't wait to get you started, so take it away, Dr. Hook.
Thank you. So I'll briefly introduce my background and research interests. I'm going to introduce the field of domain mapping generally. Then I'm going to be talking about some of the empirical and technology-based investigations of legal topics that I've done. And then I'll conclude with the title of the talk, The Mapping the Structure of and the Evolution of the Academic Discipline of Law, which was my recent doctoral dissertation topic. First, let me establish my academic law librarian bona fides. I did my MLIS at the University of Illinois, where I was a graduate assistant. At the time, Jane Williams, the current foreign and international law librarian at the University of Illinois, was the only librarian there. I worked with Michael Roback, now associate director at UMKC. I was fortunate enough to get hired on and worked under Janice Johnston, former director of the American Association of Law Libraries. Worked Paul Collister, now director at UMKC, was an entry-level librarian with me at the time, and we both worked under Paul Healy. Michael and Paul just attended my wedding out in Boulder, Colorado in May, so I still regard law librarians as some of my closest friends. I still conceptualize myself as a law librarian. And then for personal reasons, the woman I was living with at the time couldn't get a job in the Champaign-Urbana region, took one in Indiana, so I moved to Indiana. And I was a member of the law library faculty there for 10 years, working with some great people. Maybe some of these people are familiar to you in the organization. Unfortunately, my former director, Pauline Cowles, she retired and then, within months, passed away of a rare heart cancer. But we do miss her dearly, and I do miss my colleagues at the law library. I'm teaching academic libraries now, and I still conceptualize everything through the lens of my experience as an academic librarian. And those were good years. My research interest is that I enjoy leveraging existing data infrastructures in order to reveal relationships that would not be apparent otherwise. I use tools, techniques from the fields of data mining, data analytics, and information visualization to derive new insights and understandings from an existing field, and most often that existing field is law. And I'll start talking about some of my investigations now. Well, actually, let me introduce you to the field of domain mapping. And this is a emerging field, gaining some popularity and traction. But it's been going on for some time. The home for most of these practitioners is probably the International Society for Scientometrics and Infometrics that meets every other year. This summer we're going to Turkey. So domain mapping, as I wrote in a definition in a book chapter a bit ago, was the graphic rendering of bibliographic or other data designed to provide a global view of a particular domain, the structural details of the domain, the salient characteristics of a domain, such as its dynamics, most cited authors or papers, bursting concepts, concepts that suddenly stand out in terms of frequency against their background frequency, or all of these things. It draws on and borrows from 4 fields: geographic visualization, information graphics. I don't know if any of you have ever had your hand on Harris's Bible of Information Graphics. It's a wonderful, if you interlibrary loan it, I think you'd be rewarded, because it's like 300 pages of all the well-organized, all the different kinds of information graphics that you can think of. And then we draw upon scientific visualization. This field predated information visualization, and where you visualize such things as the turbulent airflow off of a propeller or the Santa Ana winds. And then draws heavily from information visualization, the subject of my PhD, where you use the distance similarity metaphor to map things spatially that are not inherently spatial, to leverage our cognitive visual apparatus to gain insights that come more quickly than working with, say, tabular data. This quest to provide large-scale overviews of fields has actually been around for some time. This is work of J.D. Burnell. He's the equivalent of Vannevar Bush was in the United States in terms of directing science policy during World War II. He was a big figure in British science. He came up with this hand-drawn map of all the disciplines of science. Followed up in 1948 by a well-known chemist named Ellingham. This is exciting work that, again, he took all the scientific fields and he related them based on their similarities and proximities. And what I like about this work is, I promised I wouldn't roam too far. In this slide, we see the overlay of the existing index and abstract services, and which bodies of literature they supported. So this is the first known visual interface to a body of literature of which I'm aware. If you know of earlier ones, let me know. And Ellingham is a known chemist, and students still learn Ellingham diagrams about phase-state transitions in the chemistry world. So fast forward to 1962, and we start, whereas these works relied on the intuitive warrant and understanding of these experts, we start using techniques to gain an overview of a domain. This is Doyle's work in 1962 that evaluated the statistical co-occurrence frequency of keywords in 618 psychological abstracts and used higher frequency co-occurring, placing those topics more adjacent. So we start to see a more rigorous, automated, empirical way to gain an overview of a domain. That work continued with Eugene Garfield. I'm big fan of Eugene Garfield. I love information science entrepreneurs and millionaires. So he leveraged the idea of Frank Shepard's Citator and brought the Citator tool to the rest of scholarship, the sciences first, the social sciences, and then ultimately the humanities in the web of science, or formerly the web of knowledge. But in 1964, he was interested in visual storytelling based on the citation trails, pathways, in this case to map the body of influence for the subsequent discovery of DNA. In 1973, there was a co-discovery of a principle that if you have scholar A and B and they're both cited by scholar C, that the co-occurrence is some indication that A and B must be working in the same area. And Henry Small, operating in the United States, and then years later it was discovered independently, Marshakova, operating in the Soviet Union, had come up with this concept, And it turns out to be one of the most effective and accurate ways to visualize a domain to gain that topical overview of the structure of the domain. Now, this is early work where it's a proof of concept, so all this is drawn by hand. But fast forward to some slides I showed you recently, multiply this by 7 million articles, we're getting some rigorous empirical overviews of all of science. This is work by Andrei Skukin, a collaborator of my doctoral advisor, someone I've met numerous times. He's a trained geographer, but he's interested in these information abstract spaces. So he can bring his geographic information chops to producing these abstract spaces and produce some very visually pleasing renderings of top overviews of domains. So this work draws from, again, the co-occurrence of keywords in 22,000 conference abstracts submitted to the American Association of Geographers, and then rendered with the ArcGIS software, which is kind of the standard in the field. And you see troughs and peaks. And what is interesting about this work is when Andre went on the job market, wanting to move to the University of California, San Diego, and interviewing with that geography department, he was able to say, you have people on your faculty working in these areas. I work in this area, filling a need and with dynamic potentials for collaboration. So one of the themes I'm going to develop is the use of, it's one thing to have an overview, but then we use that as a base map to do topical overlay to get further utility of these things. So a lot of people, they want more than just the eye candy, gee whiz effect of these things, to what end. And part of that what end is the efficient base map for thematic overlay to quickly convey additional material on a domain. This is work producing one of the largest, most comprehensive maps of science. It's known as the University of California, San Diego Map of Science, because one of its creators, Dick Clavin's, got partial appointment and funding from the University of California, San Diego. And this is, again, drawing from over 7.2 million academic articles mined out of both Web of Science and Scopus. And these are paid for back-end access to data dumps. These aren't end-user downloads of content. With 25,000 source journal titles, if you want to follow up and read the academic paper. And this is actually a revision. But what's exciting is that this map is now becoming a de facto standard. And just like perhaps the Mercator projection or some of the other common projections of the world, when you start seeing something more and more, the learning curve is less steep. You already have familiarity with the layout. Then you can utilize it as the base map for thematic overlay. Anyone familiar with VIMO? The VIMO? It's the Facebook for scientists pushed and developed by grant funding from the National Science Foundation. So they incorporate this as their base map. So when a department or a particular scholar self-identifies, their topic areas are immediately displayed on this overview map of all of science. So and you see them like an overlay of available jobs and all kinds of things. So the profession or the discipline is old enough to start having some emerging consensus and reuse and established maps, so it's kind of exciting. Two of my scholar friends, Dick Clavins and Kevin Boyack, did an analysis of 20 comprehensive maps of all science, including the two hand-drawn ones that I showed you earlier that I brought to their attention. And so 20 different comprehensive maps of science created with different inputs and techniques have created mostly similar adjacencies.
Do we want to reboot? No.
Yeah, it'd take too long. Thank you. Thank you for your efforts. Is there a laser pointer at least?
It's not working at one point.
No, I guess we have to reboot in order to
But see if the laser pointer is at least working.
Is there a switch on the side to turn it on?
So again, this field of domain mapping or maps of science is old enough to have a bit of a history and a bit of emerging conventions and emerging similarity. And the fact that these adjacencies are similar through over so many different techniques and inquiries lends some credence to that this is getting at more than some kind of ground truth of how academic disciplines are truly related.
working.
Thank you. Oh, it's working. Where's the pointer? Is that what was working? Is that the red button?
Well, you pushed at the same time, and that's why it worked.
Yeah, probably. If you're interested in following up with the work of Kevin Boyack or and his collaborators, Dick Clavins, you can go to the mapofscience.com. If you're interested in domain maps generally, I encourage you to go to the Places and Spaces exhibit. Anyone come across this? It's hosted by my dissertation advisor, Dr. Kati Borner. For the last 10 years, we've invited submissions on particular domain mapping topics, and then I sit on the editorial board that we review these things and laud and celebrate and promote 10 maps each year. We're about to start our 11th iteration. So if this is inherently appealing to you, there's a lot more than I have excerpted here. One of the things that the scholarship reveals is that law students are self-selected non-visual people. You don't go to law school if you don't like to read as your main source of ingesting information. So maybe that was one of the reasons I fell out of the conventional interest in law and started exploring some of these topics. But that's a segue to my next segment on empirical and technological based investigations of various legal topics. And this all began with my interest in the Supreme Court and reading the New York Times, and every July or end of term, June, July, they would publish a retrospective of that year's term and take the statistics published out of the Harvard Law Review in terms of the vote co-occurrence matrix for each of the 9 justices and present it in a tabular format. I always found this interesting, but there's tools we can do better. So we can take the tabular data and easily render it as a network diagram. So this is a simple, easy-to-use PIAC file. Actually, my data analytics students and information visualization students work with this free software. This input file is maybe 9 plus 40, I mean, it's 60-some lines. And what it's using its layout metaphor as if the strength of the connections, the links between the nodes were rubber bands. And higher frequencies of co-voting create a stronger rubber band, pulling people apart. So you easily see a distribution of the Supreme Court. This is work I was doing back in the mid-2000s. So featuring from the Supreme Court from the 1994 to 2003 term, starting to be the longest contingent of 9 justices serving together. This is familiar to any court watcher. We know the continuum, liberal right of the justices, but it's interesting how the technology and the tool does a good job of conveying that quickly to a novice user. And then you can threshold, okay, this is the map altogether, and it's a bit of a spaghetti, but there is a clear continuum, but then you can threshold it, say, all right, now just show me people that have voted at least 50% of the time together. And that illustrates really well the known 5-4 voting cliques on the Supreme Court. And we see the functional pathway between the two wings is none other than Sandra Day O'Connor, who is widely understood by legal scholars as the swing vote. And we relax our threshold to voting 49% or more together, and Kennedy comes in as a swing vote. So I think the tool and the technology is there to gain insight and to convey information, especially to novice users. And my goal was to try to popularize this to the point that, the New York Times would do their annual review of the term in this kind of visual language. And I might get there. We'll see. So this is a layout mechanism using the node link diagram approach with the rubber band metaphor. This is a visualization of the court using what's called multidimensional scaling to produce another layout of the court. This software works on the principle, if you consult the map of Michigan and you've got the mileage matrix, so between Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids, between Detroit and Holland, there's known miles, and that's displayed in a matrix. So then you ask the computer to crunch that matrix to find the solution that solves all those relationships. In the physical world, when you actually have known distances, that will produce one result set that looks exactly like the state of Michigan. Maybe it's displayed like this, maybe upside down, maybe viewed in reverse. And that's a common way of proof of concept to demonstrate multidimensional scaling. And people have put in actual mileage coordinates, and lo and behold, you get back maps we're all familiar with. So when you have more high dimensionality space, what the tool does is resolve conflict to come up with a solution that has what's called the least stress. So of all the many ways that you can distribute these people, these are the way to solve that problem with what's known as the less stress, and it becomes a little technical after that. And to be honest, I'm not advancing the science behind multidimensional scaling. I'm a user at this point. These methods can be somewhat what's known as stochastic. You get slightly differing views based on your layout. The weights pull a little different each time you run it. I mean, generally it'll be the same, especially with a small data set like this. This is what's called deterministic, and you'll get almost the exact thing every time. So it's interesting then to look again at the whole body of non-unanimous courses, or co-occurrence, and you see that the common liberal conservative 5-4 splits. And you also see that Stevens is a bit isolated and marginalized even from his liberal colleagues. But let's change the level of focus, and let's look at all the freedom of speech cases during this same time. And now we see that Stevens is quite central, and we see people like Rehnquist become the outliers in terms of their jurisprudence. So again, I'm excited about the use of the tool to quickly convey to a novice what is, I'm sure any scholar of freedom of speech would recognize some of these and could probably articulate this continuum, but I sure know I couldn't until running the analysis. And I'm interested in this tool and technique for storytelling. I'm a big fan of Linda Greenhouse. I've read her book about Justice Blackmun. I was interested to learn that Blackmun actually was the best man in Justice Berger's wedding. So with the two failed Southern Nixon court nominees, Warren Berger told the White House, hey, why don't you bring on my friend Justice Blackmun? And the White House went with it. So two close friends got appointed to the Supreme Court. Here's their first term together. As we might expect, Blackman and Berger are very sympathetic in their voting. But we all know how this story ends. Depending on your viewpoint, one justice evidenced some personal growth, and one did not. I'd be flippant and a little charged, but the tool and technology shows the end result. Here's the last term together, and we see the more conservative wing, and we see at that point Blackman's firmly in the more liberal camp. So I'm interested in the technology in terms of storytelling. Linda Greenhouse was the sister-in-law of the former dean at Indiana. She would answer my email, and I shared this with her, and I was hoping, like, oh, yeah, great, we'll get that in the second iteration of the book. Well, never. So then I hand-crunched 50 years of the Harvard statistics, hand-keying into spreadsheets and then aggregating the totals easily using the automatic functions of Excel. And then I could start to do some storytelling over the 50 years of the data set, distributing, and again, this is using the node link metaphor, using the rubber band metaphor for layouts. You start telling stories. These are the highest co-occurrence voting percentage. Well, it's a bit of an artifact. Sandra Day O'Connor and Roberts overlapped by 6 months until Alito got confirmed. And so there was only 8 people on the court, and all they decided until Alito got there were softballs. So it's not surprising that they would vote together so much. Traditionally, Clarence Thomas has been critiqued as being a Scalia clone. Marshall voted with Warren 88% of the time. I don't agree with his politics, but I think that critique of Clarence Thomas is unfair. So then over the 50 years of the data set, we can see who votes together the least. Not surprising, Douglas and Rehnquist, who actually served quite a bit together, but we see that Douglas was on the other end of 8 of the 12 lowest co-voting percentages. So while serving on those courts with those particular colleagues, he was a bit of a outlier or far afield from their jurisprudence. So again, I'm interested in the concept for storytelling. I'm interested in using the technology to present content to novices, use it as a cognitive scaffolding for the quick uptake of information, so then you could portray each of the configurations of the justices that serve together. So this is the 6 different composition of the 9 justices during the tenure of Chief Justice Rehnquist, so it's known as Rehnquist Court 6. These are significant cases. I did receive a tease one day when I did get a call from the New York Times. Souter had just announced his retirement. The graphics department said, hey, we've seen you published in this statistical area. Can you let us know Blackman's history of co-voting? So I literally stopped where I was, that call came in at Indiana University. Fortunately, I wasn't on the desk, and I could take the rest of the day to crunch these numbers. So again, the artifact of Souter, who became quite liberal, having a lot of disagreement with Marshall, is the fact that they only overlapped briefly, and a lot of the Supreme Court watchers talk about the freshman effect, where on your first term on the bench you vote most according to expectations. So a Republican appointee would vote contrary to a very liberal justice such as Marshall. So the next day the paper comes out, my work's not in it. I call the graphics department and say, oh, what's wrong? And they said, well, the Washington Bureau went long. So they had to cut the graphics. So, and I think I've since lost out to Lee Epstein, formerly at WashU, then Northwestern, then at now I think at the University of Southern California, who is a big empirical number cruncher of the Supreme Court work. And there is the, I hand crunched all this data from the Harvard Law Review, and in that time, subsequently, the Supreme Court data set, first hosted, I think, at WashU, has become more widely and freely available. In fact, at the time, it hadn't been updated to my inquiry years. So now there's a competing data set, and actually the political science community is somewhat dismissive of the Harvard approach. They think it's too black box, and it's hard to replicate. There's anomalies. I've also done some network approach to analyzing particular terms of the court, utilizing the West topic and key number system. So the red nodes are Supreme Court cases for the 2004 term. The green are the subject assignments. And I forget what level of the hierarchy. I think it's still, I think these are top level. But to make this work without it being a mess of spaghetti, you have to remove all the procedural things that just... So diverse subject matter can frequently have the same procedural topics, and you don't get as clear of an indication of any kind of distribution. If you look closely, you'll see that these cases up here are the criminal matters of life and limb, tending to generate more of the 5-4 splits. The 5-4 is coded in the size of the node. These things down here are the more business-oriented things. MGM versus Brodster was the Supreme Court 9-0 unanimous case that said, yeah, Brodster is just outright promoting theft of intellectual property. You can't do that. In the information science community, there was a lot of people that were disappointed with the community with that decision. I think, as evidenced by the 9-0 decision, the legal community didn't see it as that close of a case. So this is, again, the illustration of the potential to tell stories using the tools and the technology. I've done some analysis of comparing the West topic and key number system assigned topics to Supreme Court cases compared to the Lexis system. And there's surprising how they don't sync up as well as you might think, and the numbers are varying. I'm looking to do, I did an initial pilot study. At some point I think I'm going to do a more empirical, thorough analysis. If anyone wants to collaborate and is interested in doing that kind of work, send me an email. My email's on the website here at the Wayne State Library of Information Science. I haven't done a due diligence check. I don't know if people in the community already have done it recently. I still look through the table of contents of Law Library Journal. I haven't seen anything like it. So now, moving on to my current work, and the topic of the talk is mapping the structure of the academic discipline of law in the United States. So my research questions were, do faculty members on the whole specialize and focus their energy teaching courses that are topically similar to other courses they teach? Because if you accept this hypothesis or this premise, then you can use what I call course subject co-occurrence to produce topic maps that are consistent with expert opinion and other indicators of the topical similarity of law school subjects. And here's what I mean by that. So course subject co-occurrence is the same professor teaching multiple different subjects over some period of time. The period of time is one academic year, as reflected in the annual directories of the American Association of Law Schools. So everything on your ready reference desk, the ALS directories. Course names, interesting, are controlled through a prescribed vocabulary supplied by the American Association of Law Schools. It's now done on pull-down menus. At some point, there must have been, back in the 50s and 60s, there's evidence of some kind of human vetting or exercise of control over the topics, and to this day I still don't know how that worked. But so to do my analysis, we had to do a transformation from the two-mode network to the single-mode network. So I teach criminal law and criminal procedure That's a link now. I removed the individual professor from the picture. Now we've got those courses are linked. And that's the course subject co-occurrence. If you teach 3 subjects, that results in 3 of these linkages. If you teach 4 subjects, it results in 10 linkages and up in a defined progression. And then you have multiple occurrences of each of these links. So 2 professors both teach criminal law and criminal procedure. Now we iterate upwards, and that link between CIPRO and criminal law is 2. Likewise in more complex configurations. So, then I ultimately did this in 2010 and 11 and had 60,000 of these linkages. And there's a long co-occurrence field of utilizing co-occurrence in the information science community. I won't go into it, except it's interesting that the political science community was first doing this co-voting analysis back in the late 30s. Pritchett, and doing some distributions of the Supreme Court using the more primitive tools that they had at the time. So this is the ultimate map. This isn't the most pretty iteration of it, but we can explore and zoom in. I don't have the pointer, but here's a intuitively satisfying tax group. We see a business group. We see the adjacency of employee benefit plans and elder law. Moving around the map, we see a environmental law, natural resources cluster at top. We see some topics such as administrative law central to the map, and sometimes some of the local adjacencies might not make the most sense. Because part of the process is we're taking a multidimensional space and we're saying, what is the best solution to reduce these to 2 dimensions? On the far side of the map, we see the criminal law and cluster, and we see how evidence most closely clusters in terms of co-occurrence teaching with the criminal law, as does trial advocacy. And then we can do some clustering analysis and look at higher level orderings. So the cognitive chunking is the cognitive science term. To make some higher order groupings so that they become more ingestible to students and novices learning the topics. These are the 18 clusters that the different methodologies suggested were best. Some are entirely self-contained, some are distributed over some enclaves. And we might, that might make intuitive sense, such as a topic like professional skills might be taught by many different other subject disciplines and pulled in many different directions. But by and large, we have coherence and adjacencies that make sense. And then I'm interested in utilizing this base map for thematic overlay. Here are the 6 conventional first-year courses. I was interviewing at Wayne State at the time, so I made this mock-up of the Wayne State Law School textual description of the first-year courses. And what I advocate and what I'd love to see happen somewhere is someone take the map produced at great length and effort and with rigor, and use that as a visual front end. Instead of reading a textual description, you could click on the link and get to your text. But then you'd also expose a novice user somewhat to the overall big picture of law. And you can start informing some understanding of the similarity of topics. So if you know something about one topic, so you know something about corporate finance, but you've never heard about securities regulation, well, it gives you a clue that it has something to do with the corporate world, with business associations and the like. Then you can use the base map for additional thematic overlay. Note size corresponds to the count of faculty teaching course subjects. So the most frequently taught subject is constitutional law. The most infrequently taught subject in 2010 and 11 was forensic medicine, and this was an artifact one person's listed. So actually that 2010 and 11 I think was a bit of an anomaly. Some big topics were missing, and they got cleaned up in subsequent years, so I think it's about due that I rerun the analysis. Here are classes that most are often taught as a seminar, so the little S designation in the directories can be mapped. And what we see is so topics such as tax policy is seldom taught, but when it is taught, it's taught most often as a seminar. So that goes back to that theme of using the base map and then additional overlay to quickly convey huge amounts of material. You're familiar with this when I present this stuff. I also utilize the bins, 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years. 58 topics in 31-32, 104 in 2010 and 11. Any guesses to the core subject that's most often taught as the only thing a professor teaches?
Tax.
Think of second-class citizens in the law school community.
Legal research and
The
writing.
legal research and writing faculty. At Indiana, or excuse me, I mean at Illinois, like they were cycled out after 3 years. They couldn't be there longer than that. I found it ridiculous, but again, some editorializing. So these are the pairs. So 1,143 instances don't produce any co-occurrence. One person self-identifies as teaching 12 courses, which produces 66 instances of this co-occurrence. And then I evaluate the map against a 5-part gold standard. The first part is the synthetic structure inherent in the association, the American Association of Law Schools taxonomy, and this is where, being a librarian trained, looking at this stuff, you can pick up on things that I think other information scientists don't. So the fact that there's see also references between subjects is an indicator that those are related fields. So I have all those. This actually was work done pursuant to a grant from the Law School Admissions Council, so we were able to hire students to hand key affiliation data, as well as 45 iterations where those top-level subjects are changing, either outright in terms of the actual topic or their include statements. And so you get some interesting looks at the law curriculum over time. Early law school was very interested about the ownership and conveyance of property. Fast forward to 2004 and 5, all gets merged into estate planning just to make it less clean. It all got merged into estates and trust, and just to make it less clean for me, they've reintroduced estate planning. Similar about early law school is all concerned about the magic words used to do your civil pleadings or your pleadings, and we've now merged those all into civil procedure. I also make an inference of similarity. So when two subjects used to be apart and are merged, that becomes a vote of similarity. When one subject is merged into two, that becomes a vote of similarity of those two subsequent topics being similar. And this was a lot of just brute force and work to produce these, but it became the only way I have to produce apples and apples and to look at the small minutia of the permutations from year to year. This is how I convinced myself. We see that juveniles is initially under criminal procedure, then it's juveniles and police administration, then back to just juveniles, then juvenile delinquency. And then in 1976, we don't have any juveniles included with criminal procedure, but instead in 74 we see the advent of a separate topic, juvenile law. And that tension of juvenile law falling between family law and criminal procedure is reflected on the map, kind of equidistant between the two. This is Carnegie Foundation work, funded 2 scholars to list a grouping of all the law school courses. They came up with 32 categories. That's an indicator of similarity. I used the then at the time current index to legal periodicals, the Washington list, and their super groupings for other indicators of topical similarity. And I did the old-fashioned thing. I leveraged my years as an academic law librarian, and I got 18 law faculty type to give me about an hour of their time to sort these cards based on topical similarity. And we see, I can iterate through the connections, only, these are the only topics, the tax topics that everyone agreed, yes, they're in the same category. If we relax that criteria, we see the network growing. I ultimately use the threshold of 10 people thinking it's similarity. As part of the technology, I can scroll through. And so I developed this gold standard of 115 pairs that occurred at least 2 or more in each of these 5 methods. And surprisingly, only 3 of these top topics, these pairings, occurred in each of the 5 topics. Not that many occurred in 4 or more, and then down into 3 and a long tail to 2. And in terms of and this is the information science contribution of the work, to produce that map required 3 different testings of normalization inputs, 3 different ordination. I've already been talking about MDS and network layout stuff. I'll skip the mathematics behind the normalization, but to compare things occurring in vastly different frequencies, you have to do this mathematical transformation so you can make comparisons. Otherwise, everything co-occurs with constitutional law more frequently because it's taught the most. And based on an analysis of all these different layout and normalization inputs and clustering, we end up with the result of what's best of these 3x3 matrix, so 9 different iterations. Actually, comparing, working through each normalization with each visualization type. And again, this is the contribution to the information science. This is the best path to produce the map that's most consistent and highly consistent. So I concluded as a success that yes, you can use course-subject co-occurrence to produce a map of the academic discipline of law because it highly correlates to these other 5 indicators of topical similarity. And then we do overlay and additional metrics work, how long the subject's been taught. So we bend those 1 to 5, 6 to 10, over 10 years. We see these are the topics being taught by people new to the field, haven't been teaching them that long. Then we see the greatly aged topics. I've talked to several hiring panels. It's hard to find people teaching commercial law. There's not a lot of scholars writing on it. So different schools will tell you how hard it is. And it's that group of scholars is aging. Those people have been teaching it a long time, and it's not. There's not a lot of people coming into the faculty to drive that number younger. And I'll conclude with these overviews. These are the most gains in percentage of the overall canon. So we see international law that was singly just a topic by itself in 3132, split into 5 different categories, and with the highest increase of percentage of the overall canon. No surprise that constitutional law becomes more important. No surprise that legal bibliography and research becomes more important, especially when you at the Harvard initially didn't even teach it, or they taught it with, as I understand, 3 L's. And then we see the other way. What gains or loses the most in importance? And again, notions of inheritability of wealth, the business topics, sales, credit transaction, surety. All these things in 3132 were a lot bigger deal. The business associations, fast forward to 2010 and 11, not so much. And again, if I hadn't done that brute force look of the 45 iterations and looked at the includes and know how these things nest, how they morphed, how they diverged or converged, I couldn't make these comparisons. And these are my committee members, and at this time I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm wondering, I watched a demo yesterday of Ravel's Judge Analytics, and I was wondering if you've seen that or are involved in that at all? Or
No, and I've been kind of out of this game for a little bit, and like I know that the legal analytics, the commercial analytics, the proprietary analytics firm marketing the law firms is a increasingly crowded field, and I'm sure they're doing some neat things, and I need to make a note of that, and I'll look into it more. What was it again?
I think it's called Judicial
Judicial Analytics, like Revel Law.
Okay.
Ravel is R-A-V-E-L. I think that was launched yesterday. I watched the demo. It was similar to what you're doing, but it's for federal judges.
They do it for case law too. Ravel started out as a case law
It-
relationship.
Any firm librarians using?
Well, it's
I
free
very
to
seldom.
educational institutions, to faculty and students.
So is there huge uptake if it's free?
I don't, it was introduced 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it was introduced to, it's been around for a little while.
They were Stanford
And
law students.
It's free. It came out of Stanford. And I think you can sign up and register for it. And they're trying to market it more, I think. I've introduced it to my students. It's like a citator. You know, it's like Shepard's or Westlaw, but it shows relationships the way that you are. So it looks at it in some different ways.
And the ground truth test of a product's utility is does it help you gain insight? You know.
I think there's a learning curve for law students. The law students are used to seeing, Shepard's and Keysight in text. So then when they see this graphical thing, it's different and it's hard for them to understand. But once they start working with it a little bit more, they'll warm up to it. At least that's been my experience when I show it to my students. Some of them are like, I don't get it. It's silly. But I think if they work with it a little bit more, they would see sort of what you're doing and the different ways that you can look at how, because it started out as a case law, how cases relate to each other in different ways. And I think that they could see that.
Casemaker has that as one of
Does
their
it?
tools.
Okay.
That's how they're doing citing.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Or Fastcase. Fastcase.
Fastcase is a visualization tool as well.
I should add, it's definitely not free to law firms.
Yeah.
They want a lot of money. I've looked at it. I think what's great about it is what it does is it identifies patterns, for example, in a particular judge's opinions, patterns in phrases. Litigators would be very interested in that. I think, of course, the danger is, well, is it really the judge's phrase or is it really their clerk's phrase at that moment, right? So this is the danger. I've also been looking at, Bloomberg's got something that's coming out very simple, very similar, but with deals. So they're looking for patterns and phrases within deals. There's several products that are doing this now. So the analytics piece, I think the vendors are very interested in that. And it's not just for business development. It's mostly for business development, but it's also for other things too.
And I'd also say there's probably some laggards. I mean, so think of the infrastructure West has. And they could coordinate the whole topic and key number system. They could incorporate all their secondary material and make a wonderful overlay. What I'd love is if I could have access to their data and make a map of all of law, not from just the academic perspective, but from the practitioner's perspective. And then you could overlay, like all their, so you're interested in this topic, here's our nutshells, treatises, here's everything we have. They still use the visual key site, I hope.
Yeah, it's still available. The map.
graphical key site.
maps and the graphics.
Do you find your students using it? That's an interesting story coming out of West, if you've ever talked to them about the development of that. And then they know the one case that gives them the most headaches. And I wrote it down once. They told me what it was, and sure enough, it's a mess. It's, if they can do graphical key site with that, they can do it on any.
I've seen the demos where they show the map. Was it Kodak?
That doesn't sound like it. Could be an equally confusing case.
Any other questions?
Are you using any kind of software or tech to do all of your statistics, or are you just doing them by hand?
So I ran a lot of. I've gotten quite good at doing statistical analysis just out of Excel.
What was the question again for the audience? And for me, I didn't hear it.
If I use presumably one of the statistical software packages to run the analysis. So SPSS, the IBM-owned statistical package, was my source of the multidimensional scaling. In fact, I had to do an add-on that wasn't freely available at any of the campuses I was at. Cost me a bit of money, but so I have used those, and they're good. Do you have a favorite?
SPSS.
Okay.
We have a question over here.
Okay, I hope this is not a nice question, but law, it seems to be a very prestige-oriented field, and I'm wondering if anyone has done an analysis of blind peer review, cross-citations, and not blind peer review, or not peer-reviewed traditional law journals style.
So, as written, the grant, and I joined it later, it was Bill Henderson, Andrew Morris, Fumi, her last name was Nigerian, and I can't, Obetuwawa or something, and my apologies, Fumi, and some other legal scholars. Their initial grant was a study of the longitudinal change of legal scholarship. So this was an offshoot that came out of it. And ultimately what they were hoping to do was harvest all of the affiliations coming out of the American Association of Law School directories so that they could then correlate with the legal index to periodicals and see placement in journals to prove that the common perception that student-run journals can't possibly comprehensively evaluate all subjects of law, and they use prestige of the author's institution as a proxy. That work is incomplete. But it was similar to your question. It was the motivation of the data set and why the LSAC gave that group of scholars that I joined $160,000. And what's it? The dysfunction, they didn't get to that end answer, and I might take up that mantle, but they're not going to probably do that.
Thank you, Dr. Hook. I think that was a fascinating presentation, and we're happy that you carved out an hour today to come and talk to us.
I'll leave the slides on this computer. You're welcome to disseminate them. Just email me if you're going to cite them somewhere.
Okay.
I might be able to update you to a more formal publication.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much again. Now it is time for our AA Double Up update with Executive Board Member John Atkins. Since we've introduced John at this morning's panel, everybody knows all of his business, so I'll just throw it right to John.
This is a good one.
This is yours.
How y'all doing? How's your energy? Want to stand up and stretch? I just heard I'm the only thing standing between you and dessert. Just saying. So it doesn't have to be that long. This is fun. This is my very first chapter visit. And so thank you very much. Thank you for putting up with my juvenile mistakes and nervousness. But it's been really fun, and I really appreciate having dinner last night with your board. It was really delicious and fun company. So thank you very much for that. I am a very unlikely AALL board member. I'm very provincial. I, stayed in San Diego, in a little corner of the country, for 25 years.
Nice country.
Yeah, not bad. But I applied for AALL committee work every year. And I never got it. So after a while, I just decided to give up. And so I was one of those disgruntled local chapter people who just thought that the big organization wasn't very nice and they didn't like me and I'm not going to play with them. So I renovated my library, as you know. And that was like a big deal. And it became like nationwide news. And AALL put it on the cover of Spectrum. And so suddenly they knew me. And that was the reason that I was asked to do this. And I said, okay, me thinking I wouldn't win, but then I won. So I'm actually very thrilled now because having gone to a couple board meetings, I see the level of concern and thought that goes into all the work that we do, and I'm very privileged to be part of it. I just wanted to give you a couple updates on what's going on. We are starting a new rebranding initiative, and that is a huge deal that's probably going to last several years. And we're working with a consultant, and it's going to be opened up to the membership, but we had to start somewhere. And so there's a lot of brainstorming going on about, what is law librarianship today, kind of thing. And they did this with SLA, as you recall, and they came up with that horrible name. What was it? Ask Pro?
Yep.
Remember that? Yeah, they didn't last long. So we want to avoid that. So we probably will be changing our name. But we are going to be looking at how we can, embrace the future and share the excitement and passion for progress and success for all the membership. So that's pretty neat. A new slate of candidates just came out. Hope you all noticed that. Looks like a very, very good slate. Do you know that the AALL webinars are now free? And that we authorized that last year when Walters Kluwer's came up and decided they could pay for it. So that was really, really nice of them. And so now the attendance is skyrocketed. So it's through the roof. So very excited about that. Does anybody like to do editorial work? Spectrum is looking for people to join its editorial board, and that's a fun, publication. So, just saying, you might want to get in touch with Catherine. Philadelphia is around the corner, so our annual meeting. President Holly Riccio has determined that the theme is the power of connection. And they've worked on a whole lot of different programs. I don't know if you're interested, know about the program committee and how that works. Everyone submits their different programs. And they just created this new content area teams. So in addition to the actual members of the committee, there's all these satellite teams out there who are experts at their field. So that way, everyone's represented at, in the educational programs. Because a lot of times people say, there's no programs for me. Why aren't there programs for me? Well, we try really hard, but sometimes people don't submit programs. So we can't put them forward. So we're looking forward to this new process and see how it goes. Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt. I'm actually the 2016 AMPC chair.
Nice.
Yes. I mean, if you wouldn't mind, I could give everybody just a real brief.
Yeah, tell about it. You need a microphone.
Yeah, so what I was saying, So I am actually the 2016 AMPC chair. And I, like John, also had never been picked before after volunteering for years and years and years and years. And what happened to me was my former boss is actually Keith Stuyvesant, and she said, who's now an incoming president, and she said, well, you've complained about this for years. It's now your turn to do something about it. So here I am. And so on top of doing everything you saw, I'm now doing this. However, I'm telling you because what we are really hoping, so 2015 was kind of the first step in how we're changing. And Carol Watson is the current 2015 chair, and she's done an amazing, amazing job. You have no idea how difficult this whole thing is. And so the first step was Holly introduced this idea of these CAT teams. So there's content area teams. And there was 5 or 6 of them. I was on one of them. I was on the technology one. So for 2016, what we did was instead of having an AMPC made up of 8 people, which is, that's what we had before. We had 8 people deciding all the programs. It's literally 80 programs. We actually this year have 52 people as part of active members of AMPC. And I'm happy to say that more than half are actually people who have never, ever volunteered for AALL. So we have a completely new voice of people coming in. We're also going to be crowdsourcing ideas. So that will be coming in probably right after or right around Philadelphia. You'll see notices saying, hey, tell us what your ideas are. So if you've ever had crazy ideas about programs, please save them up, put them into the crowdsourcing hopper, and then what we're going to do is select. We're going to use, obviously popularity will be part of this, so voting will be part of it, and then we're going to select programs that we think really need to be done. On top of that, then we will be asking for people to actually write program proposals. Now again, there has always been this kind of secret rubric that they've used to grade them that will be published this year. So we're revising it right now, so you will know exactly how those decisions are made, so that when you write a program, you will increase, hopefully, your success rate. So we're making a lot of changes, and I'm really hoping, and I'm sorry to kind of jump in on your program and your dessert, but I wanted you to know this because I think it's a very exciting time, and I think it's the AALL is making some really tremendous changes. So thank you, John.
Well, thank you. Thank you for serving. I was on the committee last year, the year before all these great changes happened. And so we had all the secret ballots, and it was actually very thorough, and it was blind readings and stuff. So it was fair, as far as I know. The other great thing about the annual meeting is that Terry Gross is going to be the keynote speaker from NPR's, what's it called?
Sure.
Ah, you know who she is. That's great. So, who else going? You're going now. Brent's going now. Okay. And who's a member of AALL? Very good. Thank you. Are there any past members here? What can we do to bring you back? Give you some money? Okay. I'll look into that. I've got 50 pages here to tell you, but I think I'll end before that. It's just that there's so much going on, and they give you this laundry list of all the things that we do, and I don't think you really want to know all of them. But let's see. We're working on a new strategic plan. Our advocacy efforts with UELMA continue. So we now have 12 states who have passed UELMA. And I heard somewhere that Michigan has UELMA somewhere ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah? Good. That's great. So that's awesome. What else? I think I'm just going to ask you guys if you have questions, just because you're not going to be interested in all this stuff. So, questions? No? I'm ready. What do you want to know?
We know everything. We are librarians.
Yeah, you know it all. Yeah.
Oh, I have. When is AAL coming to Detroit?
Oh. Okay. Well, there's a process, and that would be the local community, law library community, would come together and say, we really want to have it here. And then you would tell the headquarters. And you would hopefully do some legwork about where it could possibly be and where, just to show that you're ready to go. So that's how it goes. I know for sure it's never going to be in San Diego because it's too expensive. Yeah, so that's a bummer.
That's not a problem.
Well, that's why I was thinking you might want to try. Yeah, not a bad thing. Let's see. Gosh. What about your chapter? Oh, yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Is your membership on the rise, or is it reflective of law schools and declining students?
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah. So that's a real issue for probably for MichALL too, and AAL. So what do you do to retain and add members? The one thing that our leadership keeps talking about is the grants to come to the annual meeting, because at the annual meeting, they figure if you get there, you're going to be, wooed by all the great vendor stuff, and your colleagues, you'll get excited about law librarianship, which I don't doubt. It is really a great meeting. But how do you do that without the annual meeting? So, when you start getting attrition, what we've been doing is calling people up and asking why, and to see if there's anything we can do, if they're feeling disaffected or unhappy with the organization. But if it's just money from their institution, then that's a different story. And also time. There's a lot of time involved. When you're serving a committee like you used to be doing, there's a lot of time. So you got to be clear that with your supervisor. That's not always possible in these days when we've cut staff and you're doing 3 jobs. Cheery. Thank you for that. Is there anything that AAL can do for you that we're not doing now? Or
I have a question. Is
Yeah.
AAL interested in going to the library schools and for students for new membership?
yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know if we do that now, but yeah, definitely. Law librarianship is always the very small portion of library schools, but it's really worth going and doing that, especially the big ones. Well, what they say, you never forget your first time. And I want you to know I will never forget this.
Okay, now we're the opposite as to how we've been all day. We have a little extra time. So we have the coffee, tea, and dessert break. They